going to get started with today's topics. Today we are going to have a guest presenter, Christina, who is just testing her microphone, and she is going to be discussing 3 tips to generate more leads for your website. She has her own business. It started in 2017, and she has over 5 years of marketing experience with small businesses and nonprofits. As I said, her own business is called Creative Solutions and started in 2017. And she has completed nearly 100 websites between her clients, agency work, collaborations. So a very impressive resume there. And her specialty is website design with search engine optimization. Even though websites are her specialty, she has a lot of marketing knowledge as well and other tips to help you improve your online presence. So Christina's going to be presenting first. And as I said, she's going to be discussing 3 tips to generate more leads for your website. And then following Christina, we are going to have Michelle, who is going to be doing ways to avert computer disaster. So we would love to have Christina get started. And if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll be following the chat for you. And then we'll have time to answer questions as well. So thank you for joining us today, Christina. We're very excited to have you. So thank you so much. And take the floor.
Thank you for the opportunity to participate. So today I'm going to cover 3 tips to generate more leads. Alrighty. So my first tip is to create a trustworthy website. And for your website to be trustworthy, you need to have an SSL certificate, a privacy policy, predominantly displayed contact information, your social media accounts, reviews, and testimonials. Now we'll dive into each of these specific items in a little more depth. So first of all, it's important to have an SSL certificate on your website so you don't scare away website visitors with an unsecure warning. When you secure your website, you're letting your website visitors know their data is safe. An SSL certificate provides critical privacy, security, and data integrity for both you and the website visitor. So without getting too technical, the purpose is to encrypt information sent through the website so that only you, the intended recipient, can access it. So when you are on Google, you might have clicked on a website and then you see the screen on the left-hand side. Your connection is not private. Would you like to go back to safety or proceed? You don't want your website visitors getting this warning before they even land on your website. So you want to have an SSL certificate, and you can tell if you have an SSL certificate by the little lock that is up by your domain name by your URL. Next, privacy is a growing concern. There are more and more regulations. The European Union enforced the Global Data Protection Regulations in 2018, and California passed their own privacy laws in early 2020. So you don't want to use a website visitor's information without their consent or knowledge. You want to be transparent with your visitors and use a cookie notice and a privacy policy to explain how their personal information is being used. So you need to clearly communicate what data is captured, when it is captured, what it is used for, what is the process for requesting and removing your personal information. There's many more details about what you need to do to be compliant with these regulations, but as a starting point, it is a good practice to be transparent and have a cookie notice and a privacy policy on your website. My next tip is to predominantly display contact information. You don't want to make your website visitors dig into your website to find the basics, your phone number, email. It should be easy to get in touch with you. So I recommend displaying your contact information, maybe it's your phone or email, on every single page of your website. It might be at the top in the header, it might be at the bottom of the page in the footer. Also, it is a good practice to use a contact form as an easy way to get in touch. That way, you know, if somebody wants to start the conversation, they can just quickly fill out their name, email, phone, instead of trying to find your email, start an email message, and then reach out to you. It simplifies it and makes it easier on the user. Lastly, if you can, include your address to promote yourself as a legitimate business. I understand, you know, if you work from home, you might not want to put your home address, and I can totally relate to that. When you go to my website, you're not going to see my actual apartment address. You're just going to see Delafield, Wisconsin. But that is good enough because Google has verified my address as Delafield, Wisconsin. My website says Delafield, Wisconsin. So everything online can show and prove to the user that I am verified in Delafield. That is one way you can work around, and I just portray myself as a service business instead of a brick and mortar location. Either way, you want to make sure you're being transparent and having your contact information out there, because we've all visited those websites where you can't find how to get in touch with them. That doesn't make you feel very good. Doesn't make you really want to do business with them. What if something doesn't work out? Can you get in touch with them? Make your website visitors feel at ease by predominantly displaying your contact information. Next, if you're going to include your social media accounts, make sure they're the right ones. Don't just use a template without checking all the links. The one on the left is actually a client who's going through a website redesign. And on their current site, they have the Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn icons. Unfortunately, all those links go right to Wix's Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn page. So it's pretty apparent they used a template and never checked the links. Don't do that. If you use a template, check that all the links go where they should be going. And the reason I recommend using social media accounts, people are kind of like, is social really that important? It is a good credibility check. If you want to know if somebody's a good business, you're probably going to go to their social profile to see, is there positive comments, negative comments, is there complaints? So by including those links, it can be just a nice second check for your website visitors. Lastly, include testimonials and reviews. When a friend or a family member raves about an experience with a company, that is so much more believable than any claims on the company's website. Don't just display your own exaggerated claims like the one on the left. Rather, display testimonials or third-party reviews to build trust. Testimonials are also a great way to show why your customers chose you. So to wrap up, tip number 1, be trustworthy. I included a little checklist for you to go through and see if these are all implemented on your website. Alrighty, do we want to do any questions, Amanda, or should I move on to tip 2?
Amanda, sorry, you're on mute.
Does anyone have any questions for Christina at this point? I think we're good. All right, go ahead, Christina.
All righty, I will move on to tip 2 then. Thank you, Amanda. All righty, so it is important to deliver a great user experience. User experience design revolves around the website visitor and aims to enhance customer satisfaction by providing a positive, pleasurable interaction with the website. First off, make sure your website loads quickly. You don't want to have a slow site due to heavy content, outdated technology, large images. Speed up your website. Aim for 3 seconds or less, but you can always kind of settle for 5 seconds. But the cutoff is definitely 5. Most industry experts will say go for under 3 seconds or less load time. Consumers have grown more and more impatient. We are now accustomed to having everything at our fingertips. It is essential that your website loads quickly. You can use a free online test like Google PageSpeed Insights to see your website speed score and actually get recommendations from Google on how to improve it. Modern websites today have a visual design. One sure sign of an outdated website is when it's text-heavy pages and like a whole page is literally just text. There's no icons, no images. You want to move away from that. We have very short attention spans, so most people are actually going to scan your website, not actually read it. So you want to make sure that if somebody's scanning the headlines, the images, they can get the gist of the page. And those who are interested can always slow down and read and dig into the details. The key takeaway is don't let your website be text heavy. Use images and icons to substitute text. This is a simple client example of how they had an old text heavy history page, and then on the right side, it's more of a timeline. I mean, you still have text and you're still telling the story of the history of Whitewater, but at the same time, you can kind of zero into certain periods and it breaks down a little bit more and it's a little easier on the eyes. So you can use images or icons, you can use animation to strategically guide the eye, you can use bullets or lists to break up big paragraphs. Any of those ways are a great way to improve the engagement of your website. Visuals and colors definitely help promote engagement and prevent that overwhelmed feeling when you see a long page of text. Make it easy for your website visitors to digest and engage with your content through a visual design. Intuitive navigation. When your website visitors get to your website, they should easily find what they're looking for. Don't have a crowded menu that has 1,000,001 options that you're so confused you don't even know where to click. Instead, try and limit your primary menu to like 7 items. And you might consider adding buttons along the top of the page for key user actions like contact, my account, or shop. The important thing is that you stay organized and there is kind of a method to the madness. Don't just keep adding to add, but add strategically. Lastly, be accessible. This is a growing area of potential regulation in the field. Right now, the World Wide Web Consortium provides guidance on how to make your website accessible. Accessibility is all about making sure your website is accessible to everyone, regardless of their situation, their device, or any disabilities. There is free software available that can make your website accessible. So in this example, I am showing UserWay. By clicking the little icon in the lower left corner, you can open this accessibility widget. Then the website visitor can use keyboard navigation to navigate the site. If they cannot see the text, they can have the page read to them. If maybe they have color blindness and some of the contrast isn't enough, they can increase the contrast. These are just a few ways that you can make your website more accessible. For private businesses, I haven't heard too much, but I am encouraging all my clients to adopt this best practice and make their website accessible. But for nonprofits, I have definitely heard of nonprofits getting letters saying, you know, your website is not accessible, you need to fix this, or you know, here's the consequences. So if you're in the government, nonprofit sector, definitely implement this sooner rather than later. Private, I would recommend doing so because it shows that your website is up with the times and you're being available to everyone. So this is a little user experience checklist to summarize the recommendations for tip number 2. My final tip is to encourage action. Just simply putting like what and why on your website isn't enough. You need to kind of tell customers what's the next step to take. What do you want them to do? How do they interact? How do they start the conversation with your business? So conversion optimization is a really fancy term, but it's all about increasing the number of website visitors who take a desired action, whether it's buying a product or submitting a contact form. So you can think of the word conversion as a fancy word for desired action. So I always recommend having a primary call to action at a minimum. For your primary call to action, you need to define what you want the user to go do and what the ultimate goal is. That might be to contact, buy, or subscribe. If you don't tell your website visitors how to get started or what the next steps are, they don't know. So make it easy for them to start the conversation and tell them what's the first step to take. So I like to think of the primary call to action as the ultimate goal. You can identify your goal and then tell them what action to take. But even knowing you have this ultimate goal of buy or contact, your customer might not be ready. Not all visitors will want to immediately purchase. Some prospects will take a little more nurturing along their customer journey. They just became aware of your business. You have to pique their interest, help them consider you favorably amongst the other options, and guide them towards purchase. So this is where your secondary call to action comes in. It helps nudges these prospects closer to purchase. So it could be subscribe or follow on social media. Both are great ways to engage your website visitor and prevent them from leaving your website without any action. FAQs. Answering your customers' frequently asked questions is really, really important to be transparent and help your customers alleviate any worries or concerns they may have. Plus, it can be a great resource for your business. So I encourage my clients to either have an FAQ page on their website, or even better, to write blog articles that address customer concerns transparently and honestly. So for me, one really key question I get is, what's the difference between like Squarespace or Wix and WordPress? Can you explain like why I would choose one over the other? So I have a blog article on my website, which is right for me, website builder or WordPress. And by guiding customers through the pros and cons of each, they can actually make a decision in their best interest. So if I quote both for a client, I can say, here's what you need to know about both, and weigh the trade-offs and decide what's best for your business. They like it because they don't feel like I'm trying to be salesy one way or another, but I'm being transparent and providing the information and helping facilitate a purchase decision. So if you haven't had any like FAQs on your website, or you don't write a blog, a really easy way to get started is just create a list of those questions you answer all the time and help customers find answers to their own questions and view you as a resource. Now, this is just another summary action checklist to recap what we have discussed so far. Those would be 3 of my top tips to help you generate more leads for your website. I definitely feel being trustworthy, encouraging user action, and delivering a great user experience is key for getting website visitors to engage with your website and then take that desired action and get in touch with you.
Thank you so much, Christina. We really appreciate it. We had a couple things come up. One of them was that it's our understanding that when you answer or use the FAQs, that helps your website show up higher in search results. Do you think that would be true?
Oh, definitely. I focus more on the customer side, but in regards to SEO, having those questions out there is so important, because you got to think of the customer journey. Okay, they've identified a product. They know their need. They're looking at their options, but then they start seeing differences between their options, and they're probably going to type that question into Google. Wouldn't it be cool if your blog post showed up as that answer to that? You just brought them back into your site. You're helping them make their own decision. You're being a resource, and you're providing value before a purchase. That is a great way to kind of tilt the purchase decision in your favor. And I can't tell you how many times I have blog articles ranking very, very high on Google, and that actually brings customers into the website. So you might not only answer the customers you're trying to win and already know about you, but you might also be able to reach customers that haven't even heard of you yet.
That is very exciting. We're always looking for where a customer could come from, and the fact that just having a website and then providing that fact information can be a huge resource.
And it's a great way to keep adding fresh quality content. I mean, you want to keep your website updated, and you don't want it to go stagnant and only update it like every few years. So simply trying to add a question or two every month or every other month is a great way to keep building out your website.
Okay, thanks for that idea too. For the accessibility piece, did you say that was a pre-built software that you use, or how does that part get added in?
User way widget is, it depends on the client and the industry. So just as a best practice, I install the free version, and you go to userway.com, you follow like the form sign-up process, and then they give you a little snippet of code that you can send to your website person, and they'll put in the header of your website. So then that widget displays, and they also give you an accessibility statement. Now, that is a step in the right direction, but they also have premium versions that include like artificial intelligence and quicker updates. So for some nonprofits, I do encourage them to upgrade to a premium plan.
Okay. That's a helpful piece too. I didn't realize that that was becoming more of the norm of life. So thank you for that information as well. And then you said something too about Google. I'm trying to remember where it was. I think it was maybe in the user experience that Google can tell you some information or some feedback.
Oh, page speed.
Oh, okay. Okay, so Google can tell you how fast things are loading on your website then.
Yep, if you just type in Google page speed insights, you'll get it.
Okay.
They're constantly updating the tool, and there's many other website speed tools out there. You just kind of have to look and see what is the most modern and is keeping up with best practices, because it is important to note, you know, something that's grading your website based on factors from 5 years ago is going to be dated and not on point. So there's many other options besides Google. I just kind of trust Google.
That makes sense. You just raised another thought too. How often do you suggest that people update their website? That's a common question that people ask.
I mean, I try and update mine monthly because SEO matters to me. I want to rank high on Google, and to do that, I know I need to make my website a priority and keep adding fresh quality content. That might not be realistic for everyone, but at a minimum, I would say once a quarter. Add something, add a post, refresh images, refresh your galleries, refresh work samples, whatever it is. Do something on your website at least every 3 months.
And then, so on a monthly basis, at least add something new to kind of refresh that way. Does a whole, like an overhaul need to happen like every 5 years or anything like that?
Depends on your plan, you know?
Okay.
So like when I work with a client, I build them a professional website design, and then I give them a maintenance contract. And for most of the time, you know, I'm around doing the technical details in the background. But that maintenance contract also includes non-routine maintenance and keeping up with best practices. So when I had a website launched and then global data protection regulations came into effect, I had to go through all the websites that were under maintenance, add that privacy policy, add that cookie notice, make any adjustments to the analytics that needed to be. So those websites kept up to date, and they're slowly evolving, so there's not that need to redesign. But if you just leave it stagnant, then you're going to be looking at a redesign like every 2 to 3 years. Most of my clients are kind of on like the 5-year plan just because it makes sense as products and markets change, styles change. They just want to refresh. But then it doesn't have to be an entire overhaul. It can just be kind of a cosmetic update. So there's many different ways, and it's just the more you keep up with your website, the less you're looking at a huge investment over time, I would say.
Okay, that's also a great tip. Thank you. Do we have any other questions? Otherwise, we're going to move on to Michelle.
I don't have a question, but I do have an observation that ease of navigation for me is the most important aspect of it. I can get around without being confused.
Yes. Yes.
Thanks for that insight.
It is so important for you to know and just be able to find what you're looking for and not get frustrated. Thank you.
Well, that and speed also, as you mentioned, we've become very impatient and we expect everything right away.
Yes. And you don't want to, you know, have someone waiting and then they're like, oh, well, it's not loading. And then they go to the search result below you. Guess who? Your competitor.
Right. I've done that myself several times.
Mm-hmm. Alrighty, well, thank you for the questions and thank you for the opportunity to present and share my expertise with you.
Thank you, Christina. So next up, we're going to have Michelle. Michelle is our project coordinator within Tech Lab. She started with Tech Lab March of 2019. She also helps me a lot with sales and marketing. So thank you very much to Michelle. She's in some ways my right-hand person, and I appreciate her a lot. Michelle's going to be talking today about ways to avert disaster on your computer and with your technology. So take it away, Michelle.
Hello, everybody. Today I'm going to share some of my most valuable tips and tricks for averting disaster on computers, and I'm actually going to address mobile devices too. So the first thing I want to share with you guys is how to not lose your work. Okay, so here I'm in Microsoft Word, right? And I find that this is the one that I always like. I start typing a long document and then all of a sudden my computer dies and I'm like, no. But it works the same way in every single Office program. So here, can you guys see at the top corner of my screen, there's this autosave and my mouse is kind of on it? Okay, you want autosave on. And I'll just, because it'll autosave whatever you're working on to the cloud. You can see it's gonna save it as that, and I can type whatever I want here to name it. And it is being saved to the cloud now. Everything I do is being saved to the cloud, is being saved instantaneously. So if my computer dies, I won't lose anything. The other thing that I want to say is that even if you're not on the internet, even if you don't have it's saving it to the OneDrive, the Microsoft OneDrive. Even if you don't have Microsoft OneDrive, I'm going to show you how you don't lose your information if you don't have this autosave on. So you go to File, then you go to More, and then you go to Options. And then on the left side here, I'm going to click on Save. And you can see that the autosave is on, which means that my document is going to be automatically saved to the cloud. But I also have this Save Auto Recover information every 10 minutes on. So what this means is that my computer is saving what I'm working on every 10 minutes, even when I'm even when I'm not connected to the internet. You can change, so that means that if my computer dies and I'm not connected to the internet, I will lose at most 10 minutes of work. I can actually change this amount, so if I want, I don't know, it to save it every 5 minutes, so I may lose a maximum of 5 minutes of work. That's cool. This is really important because if you don't have these two on, you can lose all of that. And this is the other one that's important to have, the checky box, is this keep the last auto recover version if I close without saving. If this one is, when this one is checked, when you open your computer back up again and after your computer died or whatever, it will come up on the left hand side of your screen. There'll be a box that says, oh, well, this document was opened, and you can save it if you want. It does get rid of them every once in a while, so I do recommend saving it. So that being said, I do recommend saving your work regularly. The keyboard shortcut that I use for saving that makes saving a lot easier is Control S or Apple S. Amanda, would you mind sticking that in the chat? Because those particular ones, if you hold down the control button and then hit S, or hold down the Apple button and then hit S, that will save as you're working. So we have just talked about how to save what you're working on in Office, but when you're in your browser, you can have your tabs syncing across your devices. We've talked about this last time. You can also have your browser remember your tabs when it opens up again. And both of those are good ways to not lose what you were working on when you're on the internet. The only thing is that if you're working on a form in the internet, odds are it's not saving all you put into the form. Also, programs that save everything you do, you won't lose anything there. And if you're working on a Google Drive document, it's automatically saving it every time, or all the time as well, or any other cloud situation. So the next thing that I wanted to talk about real quick is if your computer shuts off on you because your battery is low, I do not recommend that you try and turn it back on again until you plug it in. The reason is because your computer usually shuts off earlier than it needs to do so that you don't lose whatever it is you were working on. If you try to turn it back on without plugging it in and your battery dies, then you will lose whatever it is that you were working on. So if my computer dies for whatever reason, this is the first thing that I do is plug in it, is make sure that it's plugged in. And let me talk a little bit about what that means. When sometimes what happens is that the adapter gets disconnected and I don't know it. That is to say, the power cord gets disconnected in some way, or I lose power and I don't know it. So there's a couple of ways to check if your computer is actually connected to power. First of all is that if you're on most computers, where your power cable is connected into the computer, there's a light that goes on. And if the light isn't on, you are not connected to power. I can also see, I'm on the computer's on right now, so I can see this as well. This icon, can you guys see this? Yep, okay, this icon shows that I'm also connected to power. There's a couple of places to check if it's not connected. First of all, is make sure your power cable has got good connections and that it's plugged into a surge protector. And we definitely recommend and make sure the surge protector is on and working. We do definitely recommend plugging into a surge protector in case there's a power surge so that your computer doesn't get fried. The other thing is that if you do try and turn your computer back on and your computer's shut off due to battery, what you will notice is that when you try and turn it back on, there will be a warning and says, your battery is low. Are you sure you want to do this? And that's a good sign that you are not connected to the power. Let's talk briefly about mobile devices because they don't work quite in the same way. When you plug in a mobile device, there is no light that comes on saying you're connected to power. But however, if you try and turn it back on and it's kind of dead, you'll get a symbol that says, hey, either you're connected to power or you're not connected to power. The symbols are different. So as long as you know what those symbols are, you'll know whether or not you're connected to power. That being said, if your phone is really dead and you just plugged it in, you may not get any symbols when you try and power it back on. But if you wait a few minutes and then try and power it back on, if you get power, that's a good sign that you're connected to power. It may not completely plug in, or it may not completely power on, but you should at least get one of those symbols. Another thing to think about is make sure that you have the right power cord, because sometimes when you're having issues with it's not charging very quickly, it can be an issue of you didn't have the right power cord. Another thing that I want to talk about really quickly is with the computer, or the phone, if you find that you're having to jiggle your power cord in the computer, that's a bad sign. And it will your computer might get fried at some point when you have to, if you are having to do that. So I recommend taking your computer in to get it looked at, or potentially getting a new power cord, because it shouldn't be doing that. Another thing that I really want to talk about really quickly is that if you drop your device in water or spill any liquid on it, power it off immediately. The fastest way to do this is pull the power cord and then pull out the battery if you're on a laptop. You can also just hold down the power button, and this is the way that I recommend to do it on mobile devices, and that'll just power it off. The longer it is on, the more liquid is going to get into the insides of the device, and especially the electrical components. And the more that it gets into the electrical components, the less likely that someone like Tech Lab could fix your computer, and the less likely we would be able to recover your data. So if you've got a computer, as soon as you stick it, as soon as it's got water on it, turn it off, but then bring it into a place like Tech Lab, for example. If it's a mobile device, you can try and stick it in rice and leave it for a week. You can also take it into your cell phone carrier potentially. If you leave it in rice for a week, leave it in rice for a week. I know that we're all like really tied to our cell phones, so you're totally going to be tempted to try and turn it on after like a day and be like, well, it wasn't that much water, it's fine. And no, leave it in rice for a week, because if it's not completely dried out, you're going to damage it even more. For cell phones, they your cell phone carrier also often offers accidental damage warranties. And so therefore, if it gets water on it, you could potentially get a replacement. Okay, so now that we've kind of talked about where, or how to save your stuff, let's now talk about where to put your stuff, because if you were working on it and then it was saving it to somewhere you didn't know, that can be a problem, or if you can't find what you're looking for. So the first thing that we want to do is figure out where it is. So in Microsoft Office, one of the fastest ways to figure it out where it is just go to Open and then go to Recent. And if I was just working on it, it'll show up here. And you can also see that it's kind of telling me where everything is. So right here it says, as the Techsperts is being saved in my OneDrive, whereas Google Notes is being saved in Documents. If I was looking for Google Notes on the OneDrive, I wouldn't find it there, because it's just automatic, because it's being saved in my Documents. Another way to find where it's saving stuff is to just go ahead and try and save a copy and see where it's automatically saving it. Sometimes when you're saving, you're like, I don't know, it doesn't show up in recents. It's to see where it's saving it generally. So if you didn't pay attention to where you were saving it, my computer is automatically saving it to the OneDrive. If I try and get it to save it on the PC, it's automatically saving it to Documents. So those are the first two places that I should look for documents if I have no idea where they are. Each program that you work with has the same kind of a thing, where you can just go ahead and hit File Save to figure out where it's automatically saving documents. And that's a good way to try and find out where it is, if you know that you were working on it in a particular program. Typically, Office is saving to Documents. Typically, your computer is saving to Downloads. You can see that's how you can kind of see where your computer is saving stuff, and then you can click on Show in Folder, and then you can see where it all is. Oftentimes, what also happens is at the bottom right-hand corner or bottom left-hand corner of your screen, it'll show up, and then you can right-click on it, and then it'll say Show in Folder as well, and that way you can see it as well. The last thing I want to show you real quick is how to search for it. If you have been looking for something and you don't know where it is, the first thing is to try and figure out where it is on the computer, because if you have some sort of little idea where it is on the computer, you won't have to search your entire computer for the file. You can just search My Documents, for example, because it's there, or you have a particular folder where you have all the stuff for this particular project or whatever, where you've been saving everything, but you just don't remember what it is. So say I'm looking for a file called Happy Birthday or something like that. So I can type in that Happy right there in the corner, and that'll pull up everything that's got Happy in it. If I can also click on the search tools, and actually you can't really see that very well, can you? There we go. You can click on the search tools, and when you click on the search tools, if you know that you were working on it last week, you can go ahead and click last week. I was not looking at a file called Happy last week. And if you know that it was a document, then you can say, okay, well, it was a document, and mark it that way. And that way, if you get like a ton of results, you can be like, okay, nope, that was it. So those are some of my #1 tips and tricks for avoiding technology disaster. What questions do you guys have?
Jill, you said if you get your mobile device wet, leave it in rice. Is that what I heard you say?
Well, okay, let me start by with a caveat that some people have waterproof cases for their phones. If you have a waterproof case for your phone and it's just like the water just got on top of the case and doesn't look like it seeped into the phone at all, you don't necessarily need to follow that steps. This is if you like dropped your phone in the water, it didn't have a waterproof case on it, or like you left the charging port open on your waterproof case so that the water comes in. Yes, take the phone out of the case and then put it in the rice. The rice will absorb the water.
Oh. Okay.
I have been told that if it's in water and you don't have the rice immediately available, leave it in the water until you have some place to either take it or could get something. You don't want the air to start oxidizing. If you drop it in the water, leave it in the water. Okay.
You want it off. You need it off because if it's off, I think it might be a good idea to keep it in the water, but make sure it is off when you're keeping it in the water, because otherwise it's pulling the water inside the device, and that's what we really don't want, is because that's frying the electrics.
I had a pager device that fell into the water and it fried instantly when it was on, so there are some limitations. But I had a camera that fell into the water, and the camera guy said, just leave it in the water until I can fix it. And it worked.
Good.
We've all had those crazy stories. So one of the questions is, where's a search function to look for lost documents or files? And I think you might have covered it with the search documents.
Let me show you a little bit more about this real quick, because so it depends on where you're looking for the files. You have to be in wherever you're looking for the files in order for a search to work properly. If you have no idea where the file is, then you'll just probably have to run a multitude of searches. The fastest way to do it, though, is basically everything is getting saved on your C drive. So you're in C, if you have no idea where it is, you can just go ahead and type in the search right there, whatever it is you're looking for. C: drive does not search any of your external devices. So if you've been saving, you could have saved it to like a USB drive and you weren't thinking about it, then you'll need to perform a separate search on the USB drive. And your USB drive would show up, I'm in this PC right now, but the USB drive would show up down here. If you're saving to a server, it's not going to look in the server. If you have cloud stuff, it's not going to look in the cloud. So you need to be making sure that you're looking roughly where you think you might have saved it. But for most searches, if you search the C drive and you have no idea where it is on your computer, you just type in right here what you're looking for and it should find it. The problem is that if your search is not very specific, it will not, you'll get a lot of things that are not what you're looking for. So the more specific you can be, you do have to hit search in order to get these search tools. But once you've got the search tools, then you can then you can narrow it down the search so you don't have to like scroll through as many stuff. This also does take a while to search an entire computer. My computer's pretty fast even. But if anybody has a computer that's slower than mine, it's going to take longer than this, which is why I say that if you have some thought about where it might be on the computer, like my computer's automatically saving basically any documents that I make to the documents folder. So odds are everything's in documents. So if I'm looking for a document, then I'll look in documents. If I'm looking for something I downloaded an age ago and didn't move from the downloads folder, I would look in downloads. Does that make sense?
And I think the key too, because Christina and I were even saying we hadn't heard of the search, and we were excited to learn that you can search by date and file type. But in order to get that search button, you do have to click in the box on the right-hand side that says search document. If you don't have that clicked, that extra bar is not going to show up. So just make sure you have that extra click, because in general that does not come up. But if you click in that little box, then the search tool comes up.
I usually just type what I'm looking for. I would say another thing that I've had issues with sometimes is I remember it differently than I actually did it. Like I thought I worked on it last week, and then I didn't actually work on it last week. I actually worked on it too, like, you know, sometime this month. So it can be useful if you're not coming up with something on the narrow search to widen out your search as well. And like, oh, I thought I tiled a happy, but really it was celebratory. It was like celebrate or something. So yeah, if you don't find it on the first search, I recommend to widen out your search terms.
I did that this week too. I looked for Post-it notes, and instead I had titled it sticky notes. So, you know, you never know.